Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. For those of you guys that don't know me, my name is Joey. I run the Crossworld TCG YouTube channel here, which is primarily a Dragon Ball Super card game channel, but there's been a lot of new games announced lately, and whenever one catches my attention, I want to at least try to start making some content for it, and at the very least go over how the game is played. And today's game we're talking about is Star Wars Unlimited, which I feel like is kind of flying a little bit under the radar. I haven't been seeing too much about it in the news. That could definitely be because of the Lorcana lawsuit that's going on right now, but we are going to go over the how to play rules for Star Wars Unlimited. If you guys didn't know, if you've been fans of the channel, I am a pretty decently big Star Wars fan. Not the biggest by any means, but I do quite like my fair share of Star Wars, and this game actually resembles a fair amount of DBS, which will be a good transition for those of you guys that are like me that like DBS and Star Wars. So that being said, if you guys are new, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments below what you think about the game as we go through it. Great thing about this manual is that it's not only words. We will, read what the rules say, but also they have good visuals to show us what's going on here. So let's get into it. So firstly, in the rule book, I love the fact the second page is just a shot of R2-D2. Well drawn, by the way. But yeah, that's just funny. All right, Star Wars Unlimited overview. The game is a trading card game in which each player takes on the role of a leader, similar to DBS, an iconic Star Wars character who rallies their forces into battle to defeat their opponent's base. These forces are represented by a 50-card deck containing units, events, and upgrades. Those are your three main deck card types. The game is played over a series of rounds. During the action phase of each round, you'll play cards from your hand and use these cards to attack your opponent's base and units. Then in the regroup phase, you'll draw cards, build up your resources, and ready your units for the next round of battle. Early in the game, your leader will affect the battle passively, but eventually they'll join the fray as a powerful unit. How do you win the game? Each base starts with 30 HP. If you deal enough damage to the enemy base and reduce to 0, you win the game. Sort of similar to like a Magic life system. Setup. Using the two-player starter kit, the starter kit contains two decks, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. This is really just talking about opening up the starter deck box. So follow these steps to set up the game. Put your base into play facing your opponents. Put your leader into play below your base horizontal, non-unit side face up. And the whole like non-unit thing about the leaders is almost like an Awaken with Dragon Ball, so that'll be somewhat familiar. Randomly determine which player starts the game with the initiative and give the initiative counter to that player. Set aside all other counters and tokens out of play. Shuffle your deck. Draw 6 cards from your deck to form your hand. You may take a mulligan by shuffling your entire hand into your deck, then drawing a new hand of 6 cards. You must keep the new hand. So a little different than Dragon Ball, but still similar with the mulligan in general. Then choose 2 cards from your hand and put them into play face down near your base. They are now resources. You will use resources to pay for cards, and you play during the game. So that's very interesting. The fact that you just start right off the bat with 2 resources, or in Dragon Ball terms, that would be energy. Very, very interesting start for sure. When both players are ready, start the game with the first action phase. Now we do have some visuals here. So we have our base, which is basically all of our HP. We have our leader, which in this way would be the non-unit form of the leader. That might have different actions available. And then resources are going to be our face down, again, like in Dragon Ball terms, energy. Our 4-card hand, because like it said, we draw to 6, then resource 2 cards. Initiative counter to grant whoever has the initiative. Our deck, our damage counters, and our epic action counter, which is almost like a VMAX counter from Pokemon, which we'll see later on. I believe this is a once per game type of deal this counter will signify. All right, gameplay. So we have the action phase. Most of the gameplay happens during the action phase. During this phase, players go back and forth taking one action at a time. The player with the initiative counter takes the first action, then their opponent takes an action, and so on until both players have passed. So it's almost like you're both playing the same turn. It's not so much like my turn, your turn, but it's more so like we share a turn, but the initiative person goes first. The actions available to a player are play a card, attack with a unit, use an action ability, take the initiative, or pass. So let's talk about playing a card. Cards have a cost in the upper left corner. To play a card, reveal it from your hand and pay its cost by exhausting that many resources. And we can already assume that exhausting means to tap that resource. Ready will be the active mode, and then exhaust will be the rest mode or tapped version of the card. For example, to play a card that costs 2, you must exhaust 2 of your resources. So the fact that you start with 2 resources is definitely super interesting because 2 cost cards are basically turn 1 cards in this game. Definitely super interesting. All right, there are 3 types of cards you can play: units, events, and upgrades. Each card type has different rules when played, as described in the following pages. Ready and exhausted. So this is just what we were talking about. Basically, ready is your active mode or untapped, and then exhausted is your tapped. However, what I find interesting is this line: units and resources enter play exhausted, turn sideways, then become ready at the end of the regroup phase each round. So playing them tapped is definitely a new thing for me. I don't know any other card game that actually takes that mechanic and uses that, but it is definitely very interesting. So it's a form of summoning sickness, but it also might have other implications for card effects that require you to exhaust a card, let's just say. Many cards must exhaust in order to be used. Resources exhaust to pay for the cards you play from your hand. Units exhaust to attack or use certain abilities, just like I was mentioning. An exhausted card can't exhaust again until it's been readied. Some leaders, including both Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, exhaust to use their action ability. When you deploy your leader as a unit, or like flip it over, ready it even if it was exhausted before. This means it can attack the same round it's deployed. Very cool. So like if your leader has an ability that says to exhaust it, and then you turn it into a unit, you then ready it, and then it can attack or use any other abilities that require it to exhaust. It's very, very cool. And also, again, somewhat similar to Dragon Ball, where you want to try to use both sides of your unawakened and awakened leader. All right, units. Units enter play exhausted and remain in play until defeated. Units have a power and HP value. Power indicates how much damage a unit deals in combat. If a unit ever has damage on it greater than or equal to its HP, it's defeated and put in the owner's discard pile. Many units also have abilities in their text box that are active while that unit is in play. So overall, I think the card layout is very self-explanatory. I think the only kind of confusing thing are aspects icons, which I believe are basically just the colors of the cards, if I'm not mistaken. Like, instead of having just flat out colors like blue, yellow, green, we have aspects which give the cards a little bit more identity. But typically, you know, we see abilities on cards all the time. The cost in the upper left makes a lot of sense. Then the power and the HP, you have to remember power is in red, HP is in blue. Ground and space. Combat is divided into two separate arenas, ground and space. Each unit is either a ground or space unit, as indicated at the top of the card. So if we go back to Grand Moff Tarkin, he is a ground card. All ground units are played into the ground arena on one side of the player's base, and all space units are played into the space arena on the other side. In combat, ground units can't attack space units, and vice versa. Almost like flying for Magic, where like only flying creatures can attack flying creatures, but you're basically having two different fights go on. One on the ground, one in space, which is a very cool thematic thing for Star Wars. Events. Events have an ability in their text box. When you play an event, use its ability and put the event in your discard pile. Very similar to extra cards in Dragon Ball, just one-time use, then they go away. However, I gotta say, I like the uniqueness of the fact that the event cards have the art on the bottom and the ability above. So I do like the fact that it makes it easy to distinguish which cards are events and which cards are units and so on and so forth. But it's definitely a little bit jarring at first to see the art all the way at the bottom and the ability above. Definitely a little jarring, but I'm sure we'll get used to it as we look at it more. Upgrades. Upgrades enter play attached to a unit and remain in play until that unit is defeated. Upgrades provide increased power, HP, and or abilities to the attached unit. To attach an upgrade to a unit, slide the upgrade partially underneath that unit so the upgrade's power, HP, and abilities are visible. So almost like the evolution line in Digimon, if you guys are familiar with that game. If the unit an upgrade is attached to leaves play, defeat that upgrade, put it in the owner's discard pile. So we have Vader's lightsaber as the example, so very similar layout to a unit. However, I find the ability very interesting. So this one says attached to a non-vehicle unit, and then when played, if the attached unit is Darth Vader, you may deal 4 damage to a ground unit. So obviously you want to be equipping this to Darth Vader, but even if you don't equip it to Darth Vader, it still seems like you'll get an additional bonus power and bonus HP. So there's still some flexibility there as to equipping it to other units, which is kind of neat. All right, attacking with a unit. Attacking is the primary way to deal damage to the opponent's base and win the game. You can also attack enemy units. A unit must be ready in order to attack. Only one unit can attack in a single action. To attack, follow these steps in order. Exhaust the attacker and choose what to attack. You may attack any enemy unit in the same arena as the attacker, or you may attack the opponent's base directly. So that's one difference from this game compared to Dragon Ball Super, is that you can attack active enemy units, or in Dragon Ball terms, battle cards. You can attack active mode cards, which is definitely a very interesting difference comparing the two games. However, there's a very big similarity in that you can either choose to attack the base, which would be the equivalent of attacking your opponent's leader in Dragon Ball, or you can attack the board if you want. So then for the next thing, if an enemy unit is in the same arena as the attacker and it has Sentinel, it must be chosen as the defender unless the attacker has Saboteur. For more details on keywords, we'll see that later on. Any abilities that are active while the unit is attacking, including Raid, become active at this time. If the attacker has Saboteur, defeat all shields on the defender. And then if the attacker has Restore, heal damage from your base equal to its Restore value. We'll see more about those keywords later on. If the attacker has any on-attack abilities, use them now. 5. Deal damage if your unit is attacking a base. It deals damage equal to its power to that base. A unit, the attacker and defender simultaneously deal damage equal to their power to each other. If either unit has damage on it greater than or equal to its HP, it's immediately defeated. So in that regard, you have to be careful about what units you're attacking, because you might attack into something, and if your unit doesn't have enough HP, it's also going to get defeated. So I think we have some examples down here where if you use the Consular Security Force and attack a base, you just put 3 damage counters on it simply. But if you attack your enemy's Death Star Stormtrooper, you're going to trade 3 damage each, but Consular Security Force seems to be a real tanky unit. So that one's going to survive with 3 damage counters, and the Death Star Stormtrooper is going to die because it only has 1 health point. Use an action ability. Some cards have action abilities. These abilities often have a cost that must be paid in order to use them, found in brackets after the word action. This cost may include resources must be paid, indicated by a yellow icon, and exhausting the card, indicated by the kind of tap icon we've come to become used to. If you can't pay the cost, you can't use the ability. And an epic action is an action ability that can only be used once per game. Take the initiative. Only one player can take this action each round. That player takes control of the initiative counter, even if they already have it, meaning they will go first in the next round. After taking the initiative, you can't take any further actions for the rest of the action phase. You are considered to pass for all remaining actions this phase. I'll definitely need some more clarification on that one. But anyways, for passing, if you can't or don't want to take any other actions, you may pass. When you pass, you are considered to have done nothing during your action, and your opponent is immediately able to take their next action. You may still take more actions later in the action phase. So it seems like there's this sort of cyclical, just like back and forth of actions until both players decide they have no more actions they want to take, which I'm sure will be correlated to like how many cards you have in your hand. After a player passes, if their opponent passes or takes the initiative as their next action, the action phase immediately ends and play proceeds to the regroup phase. Your leader. Your leader is a centerpiece of your deck. It begins the game on its horizontal non-unit side with an ability that's available from the start of the game. Your leader also has an epic action ability that's not available at the start of the game, but it is unlocked if you have a certain number of resources in play. Once you have enough resources, you may use this action to deploy your leader. Flip it to its unit side, move it to the ground arena, and ready it. This action doesn't cost any resources and can be used regardless of whether your leader is ready or exhausted. Very cool. So I like how you get that little bit of extra oomph in your turn, which seems to not cost you resources, which is nice. While your leader is in play as a unit, it can attack, be attacked, and use abilities like any other unit. If your leader is defeated, flip it back to its non-unit side, return it to your base, and exhaust it. Your leader's epic action can't be used again this game. Cover it with the epic action counter as a reminder, but you can still use its other ability. So yeah, very interesting once again how the leader becomes a force on your field, a unit on your field that can do some damage, block some attacks, take some hits for your base, but then it still goes back to your base and is then reusable. So that's almost like in Dragon Ball if you were to unawaken, but definitely not as devastating as it would be for Dragon Ball. Regroup phase. After the action phase, play proceeds to the regroup phase. You and your opponent complete each of the following steps in order. First, draw 2 cards from your deck. So this is very interesting. In this game, basically at the start of each turn, you draw 2 cards, which is actually very similar to Dragon Ball, because in Dragon Ball, you draw 1 card, then charge a card, and then your leader typically will draw you another card in some fashion. Although Dragon Ball has a lot of draw power built in, we'll see how many card effects in this game actually have built-in draw power. Resource a card. So that's the second step. You may choose 1 card from your hand and put it into play face down as a resource, or you may choose not to put down a resource and keep all of your cards in your hand. The player with the initiative chooses whether to put down a resource first, followed by the other player. So again, that interesting kind of dynamic where both players are charging at the same time, really eliminating this like my turn, your turn type of thing. It's just about whoever goes first with the initiative counter, basically. Strategy tip. We recommend players resource a card each round until they have enough resources in play to use their leader's epic action. Then number 3, ready cards. Ready all of your exhausted cards in play, including units, resources, and your leader. When both players have readied all their cards, play proceeds to the action phase of the next round. Other rules. Aspect icons. Most cards have 1 or more icons showing the aspect to which that card belongs. Each aspect represents a different philosophy or motivation. These icons tell you what the card's aspects are and may be referenced by card abilities. Aspects are important when building your custom deck, and I'm assuming these are pretty much essential of colors. So token cards set aside and not shuffled into your deck. Some cards may instruct you to give a token to a unit. To do so, take a set aside token of that type and attach it to a unit in play. An experience token gives the attached unit +1/+1 on HP and power, and a shield token prevents any amount of damage from being dealt to the attached unit, then is defeated. If a token would leave play for any reason, set it aside. Traits. All cards have traits such as Rebels or Imperial, which appear in a small banner next to their text box. Traits don't have their own rules, but some card abilities will affect cards with certain traits. Friendly and enemy. Cards you control are considered friendly. Cards your opponent controls are considered enemy. Unique cards. Unique cards represent specific characters or objects in the Star Wars universe and are indicated by a star symbol before the card's name. You can only have one copy of each unique card in play at a time. If you ever have multiple copies of the same unique card in play under your control, you must immediately defeat one of them. Running out of cards in your deck. If you run out of cards in your deck, you continue playing with the cards you already have. Anytime you would draw a card from an empty deck, you instead deal 3 damage to your base for each card you would draw. For instance, when you draw 2 cards during the regroup phase, instead deal 6 damage to your base. That's super interesting. I very much like the fact that you don't lose via immediate deck out, because that means mill will hopefully be a lot less toxic in this game, but I do still like the fact that you get punished for it a little bit by having your base take some damage. Card abilities. Several types of abilities can be found in the text box on cards. You have action abilities, we've seen a lot about. They have bold text with the word action, sometimes with a cost bracket followed by a colon and an effect. Triggered abilities have a bold text indicating their triggering condition with the words when or on followed by a colon and an effect. They resolve automatically after their triggering condition occurs and are mandatory unless they use the word may. 3 conditions that appear most often have specific rulings and timing. On attack, when defeated, when played. Pretty self-explanatory. Now this is actually super similar to Dragon Ball Super and autos that basically have to resolve if their conditions are met, unless, yeah, they have optional wording. Keyword abilities appear in red text. Each keyword has specified rules associated with it, described in detail on page 24. Very coy of you, Star Wars Limited. This is very, very similar to Dragon Ball Super. Constant abilities appear on cards that remain in play and have no special styling. They are active as long as the card is in play. Event abilities appear on events. They are one-time abilities that are resolved when the event is played. Custom deck building. So let's learn how to build a deck. After learning the basics of the game, the next step is start building your own custom deck. Additional cards to customize your deck can be found within Star Wars Limited booster packs. Your deck must include 1 leader, 1 base, at least 50 other cards consisting of units, events, and upgrades. Your deck can't include more than 3 copies of any card. Your leader and base each provide aspect icons that dictate the colors of your deck. Your leader provides 2 icons and your base provides 1, giving you 3 aspect icons total. Most cards in your deck have 1 or more aspect icons near their cost. You can include cards of any aspect in your deck, but when playing a card with icons that are not provided by your leader or base, you must pay 2 extra resources for each missing icon. This additional cost is called the aspect penalty. In general, you should try to only put cards in your deck that match the aspect icons provided by your leader and base. This is super interesting. This is one thing I like very much compared to Lorcana, where Lorcana you have to basically play the same color, or I guess it's 2 colors maximum. This game, you can technically play whatever colors you want, very similar to Dragon Ball, but if you want to cast those quote-unquote off-color cards, you're paying extra for them, which I think is very cool, because if there's like a splashable tech card you want to play, you have the option to do so at a higher cost. I do like that very, very much for just like player choice purposes. This page here just gives us a detailed example of like how all that icon stuff works. I'm going to link this down in the description, by the way, so you can go ahead and read this through if you want to. And then we do scroll down here to see the keyword glossary, which I don't think we have to read at this time. Maybe that could be its own video or something. But overall, like how the game is played, I think is very, very cool. I like the fact that you draw 2 per turn and resource 1 because it's similar to Dragon Ball, but also hopefully will solve the problem of Lorcana where you only draw 1 card per turn. There's not that much draw power built into the game, but you still want to make resources, so your hand's going to dwindle very, very fast. I'm actually liking a lot how this is shaping up. So overall, I want in the comments below what you guys think about this game. Are you interested in it? Are you going to be playing it? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.